Namaskar. Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sree Iyer. Joining me today is Yogi Chugh in person. Yogi is a great friend of mine. Yogi, namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel.
Namaskar as well.
So Yogi has been on our channel many times before, and today we thought we'll sit down and discuss a few important topics. The first one that I'm going to be talking in this series of talks that Yogi and I are going to have is how did the Democrats lose in 2024? So what happened?
Well, we're still trying to figure that out. But one thing that is obviously very, very clear is this election was an interesting election. It came out as a coronation. Biden stepping down, Kamala Harris coming along, no primary to really get her to be battle tested, right? So then the reality came along about defending a record and then running against Trump, who was preparing for the last 4 years, attacking every single thing that the Biden administration did. So the first thing is the American public does not like coronations. We saw that with Hillary, we saw that this time. Secondly, something that profoundly happened in the Republican circles, which I'm familiar with some folks, and their entire strategy is to attack a person on their strength. And once you attack them, and you trivialize them, and you marginalize them, it's game over. And that's exactly what happened. They attacked the Biden record. Kamala Harris was unable to go against anything that she felt could have been wrong. And there were so many issues that went wrong. And that's really where I think our Democratic Party came short. And there was a big exercise in understanding that how do we get to a situation that a party that was so formidable lost? And that's more to Trump's strength than it is to the Democratic Party's weakness.
Question for you. You know, if they knew that changing horses, doing the coronation stuff is not going to work out, then why change Biden? Why could they have not done the normal process, which is that Biden is not healthy enough to run, so he doesn't rerun, just like the way Lyndon Johnson did, and let the pool of candidates go through the primary caucuses and let the winner emerge? Why did they not do that?
Well, it's not a question of them. President Biden himself had to come back and acknowledge that. I think there were many factors in his mind. He felt that he had beaten Trump once. In his mind, he was convinced that he could beat him again. The mental dexterity, the age, and everything else, leave that aside for a moment. There are also many people today who are saying that he was worried that if he were not to run and win, that his whole family would be devastated. And there was never that assumption that how could a man who's been convicted so many times continue to mesmerize the American public? But in the process, it happened. Speaker Pelosi has clearly said that it was always her wish that Biden would step down and that they would have a simple process in order to allow governors and others to emerge, and there would have been some consensus that the party would have agreed to. It's always a myth, and today it is frankly one of those conversations where the Bidens and Speaker Pelosi are really not on speaking terms. A friendship of the last 40 years that has been eroded. But to your point about what happened, right, there was a tremendous amount of excitement. Seize the moment, as they say in politics, right? Kamala Harris was able to come back and get the base excited. There was this rapid pool of endorsements. She got the Biden endorsement, she got the Clinton's endorsement. Money started to pour in at a rate that has never poured in before. So in this euphoria, and everybody believing that the woman's right to abortion is going to draw out the masses, was, I think, a misguided policy. I think in American politics, I've always realized what James Carville used to say in the famous Clinton campaign. It's the economy is stupid, economy is stupid. And there's some value to that. And I think what President Trump did is he recognized that there were just three broad strokes, right? He knew the economy was not where it was. People's pocketbook issues were being impacted. Groceries in the store were really real issues. Joblessness was certainly happening. The hollowness of America with offshoring and manufacturing going to China, Vietnam, even to a point India, right, was impacting us. But I'll tell you, Sri, what was really fascinating, everybody knew the border problem of the illegal crossings. But I'll tell you, when he came back in one of his rallies and said in Springfield, Ohio, they're eating the dogs and cats, what do you think happened? People say it was Trump just lying. He's a shock and awe guy. In that brief news cycle, the whole conversation came about that we're having this illegal immigrants, they're taking over your apartments, they're changing your way of life, and then all of a sudden America is now talking about illegal border crossing that seemed to be an issue that everybody knew was happening, but nobody ever thought much about it. Then the hurricane came along in North Carolina. You're giving illegal immigrants a $5,000 debit card, a $6,000 apartment. You're giving them free health care, job training, and everything else. But you're giving the victims of North Carolina, and FEMA's giving them $750.
How did you manage to do that? I mean, how did the Democrats not think that you cannot, ignore your own citizens when you are giving away so much money? It's unbridled expenditure.
It is unbridled expenditure, but you have to look at where we are as a society. I think you and I have talked often about this. The biggest issue that America faces today is income inequality. Trump speaks to income inequality. He speaks to it in a very different way. Bernie Sanders speaks to the forgotten class, and it's a very different conversation. One is more socialist in nature. One is more let America thrive and give opportunities to everybody, and everybody can succeed and will succeed. Often cites the example of J.D. Vance. From a hillbilly family,
Yep.
Mother was a drug user, went to college, went to Yale, struggled, but came back and
Have you seen his movie?
I have, and actually just
But
saw-
see, that's a big game changer too.
It is a game changer, but I'll tell you, the story of J.D. Vance that we talk about is one anomaly. How he went to Yale, how he met Usha.
Of course, he had a sugar daddy, an equivalent, something like that.
But
Yeah.
not to the point. The point that I'm trying to make to you is that income inequality is real. The progressives and Bernie Sanders talk about how do we take care of those that have been left behind. Their idea to everything is Medicare for all, that healthcare should be a human right. They talk about the fact that childcare should be free. They talk about college education being free. That's their way of equalizing. Trump, on the other hand, comes and talks about the fact that we have done so much to take care of everybody in the process that we are forgetting the vulnerabilities of our nation and America. Often we talk about what does make America great again, right? Make America great again, in my mind, after just assessing everything over the last many years, is it's the hopes and aspirations of a forgotten class who resents what's going on. Sree, from a Democratic Party standpoint, I think that I've always gone back and said, where did this whole notion of how we become as a party that believes more in the idea of social values? I look at the squad often, and I come back and say, what are they really, really saying? And I come back and say, you know what, it's a lot of rhetoric, it's a lot of noise, but it's not solution-oriented. And that's the problem with this activist generation class. And if you can humor me for one moment, the Gen X, the millennials, were born of a generation where they went to school and they went to college. It's a generation of teachers that were indoctrinated in their college to believe that things are not fair, and that if you don't raise your voice, the oligarchy and others will come and hollow you out. So this is fundamentally what happens. So let's just do a case example. When did the Democratic Party become a party that began to think like a fringe? And I hate to use that language, but I think that's exactly what has begun to happen.
Do you think Squad is the face of the Democratic Party
No, it's
moving
not.
forward?
It's no.
I'm glad that you're saying that.
It never was.
He's a Democrat, I'm an independent. We don't have a lot of things in common in terms of ideologies, but we listen to each other. And that's why I'm asking you this question. So the Squad is the wrong thing for the Democrats.
They're not, but let's remember the voice that they represent. They represent the voice of the forgotten class, and they represent it in a view that is their worldview of America. Now, the contradiction is the Vivek Ramaswamys of the world and the J.D. Vances of the world and everybody else believes that America is a meritocracy where the opportunities have to be provided, and what we have to do is we have to focus on simple solutions to complex problems. But Sree, let's just talk about this for a moment. Within the last 10 years, right, or 8 years, we saw what happened with George Floyd. And George Floyd fundamentally shifted the discourse of this country, that white police officers are exerting strong force on poor African-American criminals. Think about that for a moment. They're criminals on one hand, but you're calling them poor criminals as if Society created them to become criminals. But assume for a moment that the perspective holds true for a moment. You cannot then come back and start to have conversations about, oh, you can't have police officers on schools. You cannot have a conversation about minorities without having a conversation about critical race theory. When you start to have that conversation, what you're doing is you're dividing silos. And what the Democratic Party then did is took that issue even further. Then you added social issues like transgenders, right? We had LGB, then it became TQ+++, then you had binaries, then you had all of this, right? The whole debate about America became, what is this? But I think the problem that happened in my party, we were told that this is how it is, get used to it. Now, edicts work like that, but there are consequences.
Seriously?
They do. And let me tell you.
They told you that this is how things are going to be?
They don't, but the implication is that if you speak up, you're canceled out, right? You and I often heard about when people were told, oh, she's a Karen, right? As if being a white woman was demeaning in any regard because she's feeling that her opportunities were violated because she was told that you're subservient to somebody else's aspirations because we have to take care of our most vulnerable. So fundamentally along the way, what happened? I think people begin to come back and they tolerate this. Now, if you look at the Democratic Party, and you look at the Republican Party for that matter, I've always been fascinated by the notion of the conversations that happen within a party. The electoral process where you have to go through a primary so you can get the endorsement of the party forces these candidates and our members of Congress and our local elected officials to adapt to a thinking in the absence of which there are consequences to be paid. So along the way, a behavior was perpetuated, it was normalized, and it ultimately became our platform agenda. Now, when you have that, and you have been a party that is known as a party of the working class, and you have Latinos that are a big part of you because you're pro-immigration, you're literally coming back and helping them survive in a society that many say is unjust for new immigrants, right? And then you help African Americans, right? And you come back and uplift them because they were marginalized, George Floyd. So I think what Trump did is he came back and said, let's look at every one of their strengths. And then he came back and hit them on the economy and said, your bread, your food, you have no jobs. And the previous Democratic presidential candidates or the presidents or members of Congress, the majority and this, have been a problem. I'm here and I will solve the economy, I will solve the immigration, and I'm going to come back and ensure America becomes safe, secure, and prosperous. The Democratic Party did not seize that moment. They felt at that time that the abortion vote was going to deliver. But here's the argument I've had with so many of our Democratic activists. You know, a woman's right to defend an abortion is a sacred trust. I'm all for it.
I couldn't agree with you more.
But she still has to ensure that her husband is employed. She still has to ensure that her child can get into a college. She still has to understand that why is her child losing out on an AP class? Because the school has now focused those allocation of funds to DEI programs rather than trying to get teachers. Why are we focusing on ensuring that certain trans children, boys and girls, should be able to participate in sports, they should be able to use restrooms? That profoundly shakes the core of who you are. You can never openly say it, but you hold on to that. Trump tapped into that, Sree, and literally he broke every coalition. He is now seen as a president of the working class, when the Democratic Party, the party of FDR. So fundamentally, I think it's time for a generational shift in American politics. I think the Democratic Party has to seize the moment. And I know what Trump is doing, but I do think that the Democratic Party has to be very objective. And as we talk about the first 2 weeks, I really believe my party is doing it all wrong all over again.
Well, viewers, this is, like I said, it's a series of multiple conversations, and I'm going to park it here because we're going to come back about the first 2 weeks of President Trump in a different conversation. But one last question that I have to ask, I have to get this off of my chest.
Sure.
Yesterday, I think, AOC, yesterday or day before yesterday, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she is seen, by the way, as a presidential prospect by Democrats. And you set that thing in the back of your mind, viewers. And let me try to explain what she was saying. She was saying Elon Musk is dumb. he's not intelligent at all. And then it just goes on a rant on that. My question to her is, this guy is running at a given time 4 companies simultaneously, each one a trendsetter in its own right.
Right.
And he's doing a good fist of it. Many of these companies are profitable, 1 or 2 may not be profitable yet. What has AOC done? See, you got to have, in India they say, you have to earn the right to be able to criticize somebody. You have to earn that right to be able to criticize someone.
I don't agree with the statement that she made about Elon. I think Elon is once in a generation genius.
Yeah,
and
he's the current Steve Jobs, if you ask me.
I think he's far better than Steve Jobs.
Yes.
I think Elon Musk has captured into the sensibilities of the world, and he's at a point in his life where money doesn't matter to him anymore. People often talk about the fact that he's aspiring to be the first trillionaire. I don't think money fascinates Elon anymore. I think he genuinely believes that if Biden had won, it would have been the end of our civilization and the end of Europe, and it would have been the end of other parts of the world as well, Latin America and all of that. AOC was fundamentally wrong in what she said about Elon Musk, but I think what she's trying to do, she's trying to be the voice of dissent with the activists who resent everything that President Trump is trying to do right now. What you're going to begin to notice, everybody is trying to be this maverick, as I am the voice of the resistance. In this case, Trump is the resistance. Regrettably, Trump and Elon today, the Democrats would like to portray that as a co-presidency. And I think what AOC is doing is she's pandering to her crowd, pandering to her base. Her aspirations of running president are contingent upon one thing, that she has to carry the Bernie Sanders baton. She may win a primary. She may, assuming that, Trump does horribly, assuming, she'll get crushed in the general. Because most voters who deliver an election are independent leaning. I think the independent electorate in America is Democratic on certain issues, they're Republican on certain issues, but they want common sense. They overlooked the 6 years of Trump's baggage. That came incorporated, as they say, when you hedge, it's incorporated into the actuarial model that he's going to be shock and awe. But in the end, they do believe that government and its nuance of endless spending geared towards things that one can never understand has to stop. So their goal is to come back and say, we can't touch Trump. We can figure out a way to get Elon to be sidelined, and they're betting on the fact that Trump is going to get frustrated with Elon and he's going to cut him off. Now, that's what Bannon would like to see. Because Bannon resents...
I know, he's one of those guys who was kind of lost out in all this stuff, isn't it?
No, he's not lost, to be honest with you. I've been a believer that the Vivek Ramaswamy was a casualty of the statement that he made in the H-1 defense.
Yeah, somebody played it up and
Bannon was able to come back and isolate Vivek, and then Trump tried to come back and say, let's get him to get appointed to the Senate in Ohio, but the senator from Ohio has been a maverick, and he had his own appointment, but then they geared him towards...
The governor of Ohio,
whatever.
He had his own guy,
He had his own gal, or whatever. But Vivek was then ushered into the fact that let's run for the Senate, and then all of a sudden, Bannon got rid of him because you're indispensable. On the other hand, how do you take one guy who spent $125 million on an election, who lived in Pennsylvania, did aggressive data mining and algorithms to come back and target voters and deliver a swing vote in Pennsylvania, which had to be won by the president, but subsequently...
This is Elon Musk that Yogi is talking about, because a lot of you don't know how much effort he put into, by way of data. Putting your money where your mouth is the first part, but also delivering afterwards, Pennsylvania, was something else.
And there were many other people, the persistence and all the other people in Turning Points that ran the ground game. But here one has to fundamentally understand that if you are looking at the Democratic Party, look at what happened to Fetterman. Fetterman went to Mar-a-Lago to meet the president. He's trying to become a maverick.
He's a changed man now.
Well, he's not a changed man. He's trying to do what he needs to do in order to find his lane to run for president. Along the way, what has happened is he went to meet Mar-a-Lago, then he came back and said, you know what, I support some of the nominees, and then he comes back and says, you know what, the statement that President Trump has made about taking people from Gaza out of Gaza is an interesting idea, but then pretty soon he got so much pressure from the base Keep in mind, Minnesota, where he won from.
I thought he was from Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Sorry. So he is now coming back and saying, I'm not going to support RFK and 𝗏𝗏𝗏, because even he has to understand the nuances of the lane that he has to plan. You could be a maverick till you can become a maverick, because somebody will primary you. That's really the unfortunate part about American politics.
Yes. Thank you so much, Yogi, and we will be continuing this conversation. Please like this video and please share it with all your friends, especially your friends who are Democrats, because I think a moderate voice from the Democratic side needs to be heard, and I think everybody will sit down and listen to this series of conversations that I'm having. Like I said, Yogi and I are great friends. We may not agree on everything, but we always listen to each other. Thanks once again.
Thank you.
Namaskar.
Namaskar.